don't tell anybody. I'm sick of coming here every year and talking about the Kansas City Chiefs.
Look, remember a few years ago we were here, people saying, Andy Reid's going to retire. I'm like, no way. When you're riding Seabiscuit, Secretariat, when you're riding a horse that you know can win, who would jump off that?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
My mom, she was a professional ballet dancer. My aunt played professional tennis. My dad played football at Pitt when they won a national championship. My sister ran track at Stanford. So it's just kind of in my blood to love all sports. And so I've always obviously loved golf, but it's been nice to kind of branch out a little bit more and get into different sports and different topics and not just always do golf.
Only on SportsGrid.
I have no idea how to categorize what Mavericks GM Nico Harrison pulled off, Joe. All I know is that he shipped off Luka Doncic without telling Luka about it.
If you thought conditioning was a problem for Luka, wait until you get a load of Anthony Davis tripping over air and then missing 40 games because he's like Glass Joe.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Good morning. Welcome to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. It is Thursday. We're getting closer and closer to the Super Bowl on Sunday. Our live coverage continues at 3 o'clock Eastern. Scott Farrell, Coast to Coast. Today is usually the biggest day out of Radio Row, so I would expect a lot of fun guests and some great content coming your way. Also on social media at SportsGrid and at SportsGrid TV. Over on the app formerly known as Twitter, currently known as X. Here on the show, we're still known as NewsWire. Adam Kaufman will join us a little bit later in the show. We'll talk some NFL, look at some props as well. We will also check in, of course, with Gilbert McGregor from Sporting News. And no doubt, we got you covered in golf, too, because Brady Kannon is going to join us ahead of the Phoenix Open, which is teeing off as we speak right now. But today's also the NBA trade deadline, and a lot of moves already being made. So not really sure what we're going to get today, but maybe the biggest final move of the trade deadline occurred yesterday. Finally, the Miami Heat found a taker for Jimmy Butler. He's headed to the Golden State Warriors, where it's a very complicated trade indeed because several teams were involved. So Miami gets back Andrew Wiggins, Kyle Anderson, PJ Tucker, and a 2025 top 10 protected first-round pick. There are some moves involved with this as well because Detroit is getting Josh Richardson out of this from the Heat, a second-round pick, and also Lindy Waters. And Utah gets Dennis Schroeder. He was involved initially to go to Miami. 2032 second-round pick does Utah get as well. Also, Butler ended up signing the contract extension that he was looking for 2 years. So it looks like, at least for the time being, the Heat is happy. Jimmy Butler's happy in Golden State. He gets his money. And now we'll just see how far the Warriors end up going with Steph and Butler together on the same court. Meanwhile, Brandon Ingram also a trade as well, as he's being moved to average 22 points a game this season. The NBA still making tons of moves at this point, as it would appear that as of right now, there's no question that some teams are still trying to get better. And indeed, this is what the case is, as New Orleans moves him to Toronto. Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, and a first-round pick also involved in the deal. Pete Alonso, staying in New York, signs a 2-year, $54 million contract. He's got an opt-out after the first year, so the Mets offseason is now complete, with Alonso returning to play first base for the Mets for at least 1 year. As I mentioned, he has an opt-out, so if he has a big year, he can go back into free agency, which I'm sure is what he was hoping for. Other teams were involved like Toronto, but he ends up staying home in New York. Mets lineup is fantastic. Ohio State wins a national championship. They've rewarded Ryan Day. He's going to be paid for a long time and is staying in Columbus as the head coach of Ohio State, signing a contract extension to stay in Columbus. And after winning a national championship, there's no question at this point that this is what the fans would have wanted, a 7-year deal. It is $12.5 million annually, one of the highest paid coaches in all of college football. Robinhood, of course, the contract announcement that they made, the Commodities Future Trading Commission, the FTC, at one day after Robinhood announced that they were starting taking like futures or access to sports derivatives on their website, said no, they can't do it. So it's done already. The CFTC requested the shuttering of Robinhood sports events contracts. It's just so complicated to talk about because they're not calling it sports betting. They're calling it like contract stuff. So I don't even know how to essentially to categorize it. But they're saying that it was a partnership with a prediction market called Kalshi, which is very popular. But essentially, moving forward, they're going to have to figure out another way to do this. Robinhood has not had the best run over the last few years, without a doubt. All right, let's get to the latest in this arrest. Do you remember Joe Burrow had his house broken into? They found the people who actually broke into his house. They were wearing some of his stuff, including his chain that said JB9. They filed a federal grand jury in Cincinnati, and it looks like there's 3 gentlemen that were responsible for this. They're believed to be involved in a Chilean South American theft group. They were charged with transporting stolen goods, interstate and falsifying records in a federal investigation that included breaking into the house of Joe Burrow because they knew Burrow was playing football. Hopefully we can put a stop to this. The National Football League, there's always talk about adding more games. Never thought we'd go from 16 games to 17 games. How about going from 17 to 18? Well, Roger Goodell at his press conference talked about not if, but when they added 18th game to the NFL season. What would this mean for the preseason? What would this mean for the bye week? Still remains to be seen, but the executive director of the Players Association, Lloyd Howell Jr., says, hold the phone, this ain't happening.
I heard the commissioner remark recently that the league has made enough progress on health and safety to expand the regular season. Frankly, we're not sure how he's reaching that conclusion based on the data we've been given access to. Right now, when I have talked to the players over the last, 2 seasons, no one wants to play an 18th game. No one. The 17 games is already, for many of the guys, too long. 17 games is also so lengthy that you're still dealing with injuries going into the next season. So there are a variety of issues that hang off of the length of the season before any form of negotiation. So what are those? Some of which I spoke to in my opening comments. You've got health and safety issues, recovery. What does that mean in terms of number of bye weeks? What does that mean in terms of the off season? What does that mean in terms of the complexion of the 18?
All right, so no 18 games? Is that what we're saying here? Maybe more money will be involved. All right, the NFL is going to Australia. Not in 2025, but in 2026. It's going to be played in the Melbourne Cricket Ground. First ever NFL game played in Australia. How about Myles Garrett asking for a trade away from Cleveland? He consulted with none other than LeBron James as to how to make this possible. He said he's not aligned with the Browns and some of their higher ups. Garrett is an all-time franchise player, one of the best players on defense in the NFL. Also, Bengals' Trey Hendrickson said he needs a new deal, or he'd like a trade. 17.5 sacks, 2023, 2024. Bengals no stranger to contract disputes, just like they had with Jamar Chase this past year. All right, the Lakers finally got their big man. It is Mark Williams from the Hornets. They've been searching for one now that Anthony Davis is gone. They trade former first-round pick Dalton Knecht and Cam Reddish. They're going to the Hornets. Williams goes back to L.A. Meanwhile, what a big game for Wemby. Hit a big free throw. The Spurs beat the Hawks as De'Aaron Fox made his debut for San Antonio. 126-125 the final. Fox had 24 points. Needless to say, big part of the end of the game is Fox gave the ball to Wemby at the end. Wemby got fouled. They ended up winning the game, and Fox talked about that play.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say we walked through the play, but we haven't walked through it. It was a great drawn-up play, and I've told those guys, like, regardless of how well I'm playing in a game, I draw attention, and that's what happened. They put 2 on me, whether it's a miscommunication or that's what they wanted to do. And he rolled and tried to finish strong, got fouled. It's funny because I told him in the time I was going to tell you better not kick that ball out. Like, we live or die by what you decide to do, but we definitely live or die by you taking that shot. So you go to the basket strong, you get rewarded. And he would have knocked down 2 free throws if we didn't agree on missing that last one. But I mean, that's a big time free throw, and that won us the game.
Meanwhile, it's early February, but is there anyone even in the running outside of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for the NBA's MVP? Folks, he had another 50-point game last night. The Thunder rout the Suns 140-109 with rumors surrounding maybe a Kevin Durant trade on the other side. Also, Chet Holmgren looks like he's coming back for Oklahoma City as well. But what a season for SGA. Also, Anthony Edwards, the superstar, had 49 points last night. Timberwolves beat the Bulls 127-108 the final. And by the way, we await the debut of Luka Doncic, which could come Saturday for the Los Angeles Lakers. In college basketball yesterday, not much of a match. Duke was 18-point favorites, and they win by almost 30 against Syracuse yesterday. 11 points for Cooper Flagg, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. The final 83-54. Tennessee gets past Missouri, number 4 versus 15, 85-81. Rutgers beats Illinois 82-73, and Michigan takes out Oregon 80-76. It's their third straight victory, and the Ducks have now lost 4 games in a row. We mentioned the signing of Pete Alonso for the New York Mets. Also is being reported today that Tommy Pham, the much-traveled Tommy Pham, has signed a 1-year deal with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Most of the big free agents in baseball have come off the board, still waiting for third baseman of the Astros, Alex Bregman. We'll see where he ends up. All right, speaking of movement and trade, the NBA has been filled with it the last 72 hours. What is next? Have we seen it all? We'll find out next. Gilbert McGregor joins us from Sporting News after the break.
It's finally here. The big game is just days away, and SportsGrid is live from New Orleans all week long, bringing you the latest news, insights, and analysis from the biggest names in the game. And on game day, we've got you covered all day long with expert picks, live odds, and everything you need to make the most out of the biggest game of the year. Don't miss a second, and it's all happening only on SportsGrid.
Even the great Nick Saban had to put his team together to do it his way. We know Coach Ryan's coming in to come run the offense, who was his right-hand man, a good friend of his at UW. And, now he's coming in. Everything is going the way we want this thing to be. Coach DeBoer is a great recruiter. He's a great father of players. He's a great leader of men. He's going to do great.
Only on SportsGrid.
It's the greatest show ever. It's funny, and you know what I like? You have balls. I mean, the stuff you do on that show, you are half crazy.
I feel like a good sense of humor, and I like to show it off. And this kind of originally started where people were the hot dog eating challenge was something that I always wanted to do, and every 4th of July, and I was like, I could eat a ton of hot dogs.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
All right, Gilbert McGregor is here with us, so we know he's locked into whatever studio or home office he's using today because the trade deadline is coming. But Gilbert, I'm sort of thinking that, and for good reason, I'm sort of thinking that there's nothing that's going to be topped after these trades we've seen. Of course, the Luka AD trade, that was the big one. De'Aaron Fox, pretty significant one as well. We saw him play last night. And then, of course, we get the Jimmy Butler trade. Brandon Ingram even gets traded too. So I don't know. I mean, I guess Kevin Durant's name is out there again for like the 15th year in a row, it feels like. But beyond that, I mean, we'll probably get some small moves. I don't know. I mean, was like LeBron James going to get traded today or something like that? Have we seen the biggest moves, you think, thus far?
You know what, Craig? We've probably seen the biggest move in league history with the Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis deal happening over the weekend, and it set the bar pretty high for what is to follow. And it's been a pretty wild week of trades and a lot of things that were expected, but oftentimes we don't get resolutions for those things with De'Aaron Fox and Jimmy Butler, and those things kind of sorting themselves out. Even seeing Jonas Valanciunas, a name like that, who was mentioned oftentimes in trade talks. Now, there's some people who I have my eye on, and teams like the Warriors who could remain active. The Lakers could also remain active, and because they are big name teams, it'll be a big deal if they're able to make another trade.
All right, so let's start with the two trades yesterday. I don't think anybody's surprised Jimmy Butler got traded, so we'll just break that one down. But I did see some surprise that Brandon Ingram, the specifics of the deal that he got moved yesterday. Was this expected? Did this one sort of fly under the radar of like a lot of folks? I mean, look, not to the magnitude, obviously, of the trade with the Lakers and Mavericks, but did you see this one coming?
You know, as we got closer to this deadline, I did start to expect something to happen. He was linked to both the Raptors and the Hawks, and his time in New Orleans was seemingly coming to an end. The emergence of Trey Murphy III kind of opened a spot or needed the need for him to have more opportunity in New Orleans, and that kind of pushed Brandon Ingram out of the door. The Raptors are a team who now have a very talented lineup. We talk about Brandon Ingram, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, and Scotty Barnes. That's 4 talented young players. Will the fit work? That remains to be seen, but kind of a buy low spot for the Raptors. They're trading Bruce Brown, who was on his way out anyway, Kelly Olynyk, an older player, as well as draft capital. So I think it could be a win-win for both teams. If Brandon Ingram was going to walk anyway from New Orleans, they get a draft pick in return instead of losing it for nothing.
All right, so now let's get to Jimmy Butler. And, Gilbert, as you know, living in South Florida, following the bouncing ball with the Miami Heat. I mean, honestly, I've had season tickets for the Heat, have always been a Heat fan. But I don't know where the delusion has set in on Heat fans through the years. Maybe it's just the fan base here in Miami. I'm not really sure. But, Jimmy Butler, he's now a bad guy. He's not going to get traded. He's not going to get to go where he wants. He's not going to get to sign a contract extension. I mean, I guess that's being a true fan because all that stuff was wrong. He ended up going to Golden State. Obviously, he wanted to play there. Obviously, he got the money that he wanted to get. And so, in the end, it was a horrible situation to have to end with. But my gosh, get over it a little bit. He was fantastic for the Heat. He was amazing while he was here. This is the way that he goes out in a lot of different teams. I just hope that the Heat can move on from this. And, I'm guessing Butler's going to be very good for Golden State now.
It's one of the most high-profile games of chicken we've seen in professional sports, with Jimmy Butler just kind of seeing how much of the limits he could push with his end in Miami. And I think for the fans, I understand the emotions involved, but don't let the ugly ending distract you from what Jimmy Butler was able to accomplish in a Miami Heat uniform. Now, as far as the deal, I feel like it's a win-win, right? Jimmy Butler got what he wanted, a new situation, and got paid. $121 million over the next 2 years is no small price for a guy his age. So we'll see what he still has in store. But I think the Heat's return and getting Andrew Wiggins, he's younger, he fits that culture, he plays hard, and he's having a good season as well. So at the end of the day, it could have been much uglier. Like I said, he could have walked for nothing. To be able to get those guys in return and get rid of the distraction and move on moving forward, I think is big for both parties.
All right, so Butler goes to Golden State. That was last night. That was probably the third of the 3 biggest trades. The biggest one, of course, Luka. We're going to see how that one plays out. I believe he'll make his debut this weekend. And then De'Aaron Fox. I mean, I guess, Gilbert, it'd be silly to even ask which one you're most interested in watching because we know. I mean, it's this one. And boy, I mean, the world will be watching. I mean, the NBA's rate. Is it Saturday night that the Lakers play?
Saturday afternoon.
Saturday afternoon. So ahead of the Super Bowl. It's a big weekend for sports again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be exciting to see. It's kind of one of those things where I've now seen him in Lakers gear on the bench, seen him in his uniform, but it won't really feel real until you see him suit up on the floor next to LeBron James. There are going to be a lot of questions about how the two are going to fit next to one another. But the answer is they're 2 of the smartest basketball players in the league right now, and probably the game has ever seen. They're going to eventually figure it out. And the fact that Luka Doncic is making his debut in early February is good for the Lakers because they have about a 2-month runway until the postseason. The Lakers are playing really good basketball right now. Got a big win over the Clippers on Tuesday. They have another big game against the Warriors tonight, who will probably be undermanned because the trade has yet to be finalized. So the Lakers have a lot of momentum on their side. They're incorporating not just any piece, but Luka Doncic at a great time right before the All-Star break. So I'm excited to see what comes of that. And then when they incorporate Mark Williams, who they acquired last night as well, should be big for them in the front court. So it's an exciting time if you're a Lakers fan.
All right. Kevin Durant seemingly doesn't want to go anywhere. It seems like he wants to stay in Phoenix. Again, just reading the tea leaves from what's being reported, but his name is the biggest one that's out there. Even if it's a small possibility, it's a possibility. Houston, New York, Memphis, there could be a number of destinations here. What's funny is that we've gone from talking about how Phoenix gets out from Bradley Beal for 2 weeks to not mentioning him in the last week. And now all of a sudden it's pivoted to Durant. Is that tied together with Beal here? And what would that signal, by the way? If they traded Durant, does that signal that Phoenix doesn't think that they have enough to win now?
Absolutely. First of all, the Bradley Beal no-trade clause, one of 10 players in league history to have a no-trade clause, by the way, has just altered the entire direction this trade deadline has gone. But I think that the Kevin Durant thing, if he ultimately is moved, and they're not really any landing spots for him right now, just signals that they have a very aggressive ownership group. Matt Ishbia has been shaking things up since he arrived to the Valley of the Sun, and he'll continue to do that until he builds a championship winner in Phoenix, because one of the oldest NBA franchises to never win a championship. So their owner is definitely trying to make something happen.
All right. DeAndre Hunter is a name that a lot of people think could be the biggest one to be moved today. The Hawks, certainly, I don't know what direction they're ever headed in, Gilbert, to be honest. Nick Claxton, Cam Johnson are the others. Of those four, it looks probably one. What would you say, 1.5 set the over on being traded today?
I would go with the under, actually. I think DeAndre Hunter to Cleveland kind of feels like it's going to happen. Another name I keep an eye on is Nikola Vucevic from the Bulls, maybe back to the Warriors.
All right, Gilbert, stay busy today. I know you will, and enjoy the Super Bowl Sunday and the Super Bowl basketball game on Saturday. Thanks again.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll be back and hit on Super Bowl week live from Radio Row next.
It's finally here. The big game is just days away, and SportsGrid is live from New Orleans all week long, bringing you the latest news, insights, and analysis from the biggest names in the game. And on game day, we've got you covered all day long, with expert picks, live odds, and everything you need to make the most out of the biggest game of the year. Don't miss a second, and it's all happening only on SportsGrid.
Even the great Nick Saban had to put his team together to do it his way. We know Coach Ryan's coming in to come run the offense, who was his right-hand man, a good friend of his at UW. And, now he's coming in. Everything is going the way we want this thing to be. Coach DeBoer is a great recruiter. He's a great father of players. He's a great leader of men. He's going to do great.
Only on SportsGrid.
This is the greatest show ever. It's funny, and you know what I like? You have balls. I mean, the stuff you do on that show, you are half crazy.
I feel like a good sense of humor, and I like to show it off. And this kind of originally started where people were the hot dog eating challenge was something that I always wanted to do every 4th of July, and I was like, I could eat a ton of hot dogs.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Well, if you're not with us from about 3 p.m. till about 10, 11 p.m. at night, you're missing some great coverage of the Super Bowl in New Orleans. It continues today, so make sure you keep it locked here on the grid. Of course, the Super Bowl will be on Sunday, and our coverage continues this afternoon. Time now to get to the very latest and hear from Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, Nick Sirianni, Vic Fangio, and also our very own Kevin Walsh spending some time out on Radio Row. Time now for the Sports Grid Sound Off. Some of the stars in the National Football League making the rounds, as they would say, on Radio Row. Fortunately, our very own Kevin Walsh had an opportunity to talk with one of the stars of the New York Giants, Kayvon Thibodeau, out there talking a lot about the future and his own future with the New York Giants. It remains to be seen what will happen with his personal situation and kind of where the Giants go from here. Just one of the topics that they discussed out on Radio Row.
The quarterback position probably dictates how much the team is on the 1-year plan, 2-year plan, 5-year plan. You know that you guys are up in the air going into the season. Is that something that, I know it's February, but are you keeping tabs on the draft and what you're hearing around the team potentially doing, Kayvon?
We're kind of sitting back right now. It's a little time before the draft. It's a little time before everything. And right now, I think, I can say for both of us that we're really just kind of focusing on resetting ourselves and resetting our minds to, back to that energized state where we can go and get ready to, take on this next season.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you about the draft process? Again, from my further out view, I found your process a little interesting because I think this tends to happen where by the time you're a sophomore, you're a star. So then there's another year, and it feels like all the time they try and find something wrong. And I feel like more often than not, that guy then always has a very good career because it's like we've overthought this. Were you aware of those things in the process and what you had thought that all played out?
Well, I think it's all entertainment. And that's the part as a human being that you forget that when the season is done, like after this Super Bowl is over, everybody still has a job to do. So they have to find stories and find things to create. And the only thing to talk about during the offseason is the draft process.
One of my favorite green jackets I've seen outside of the Masters, fair to say. All right, meanwhile, another Super Bowl for Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes. They've gotten all of the Super Bowl awards. They've gotten their individual awards. And Kelce talked about where things go from here.
Was a lot more focused on individual success, and I think that comes with having the individual success, is being able to be comfortable in who I am and confident in who I am. And I think with that individual success, I've started to really understand what's real, and what's real is this game's only fun if you win football games with the people around you, man. And once I figured that out, it really just took off for me, and I've loved playing in the league ever since, man.
What does Travis Kelce bring to the Chiefs beyond what he does on game day?
I think it's the level of leadership, someone that comes to work every single day. And obviously with his career, he could take reps off. He can kind of wait to play in the game days, but that's not his personality. He wants to be out there. He wants to put the work in. And whenever you have your Hall of Fame guy putting the work in, it kind of bleeds through the rest of the football team.
A lot of people feel the Chiefs have at least 2 players headed to the Hall of Fame after they're done. Patrick Mahomes, without a doubt. Kelce, without a doubt. Even Chris Jones on the defensive end, too. And Andy Reid could be a 4th. All right, no Hall of Famers just yet, maybe, for the Philadelphia Eagles, fair to say. But they have their hands full with the Hall of Famer, Patrick Mahomes. Here's the head coach, Nick Sirianni, on how to stop the quarterback.
We'll have to stop Patrick Mahomes. We'll have to be on our game. We'll have to tackle well. We'll have to get off blocks well. We'll have to rush well. Have to be on the same page. He obviously presents a lot of challenges. He's a phenomenal football player and presents a lot of challenges, so we'll have to be at the top of our game.
They've come around quickly. They have the intelligence and the makeup to come around quickly. At some point there in the middle of the season, we figured out what kind of style we need to play with these guys. That's helped. And they've just gotten better and better and better.
They certainly have. And by the way, the current line at the Super Bowl, Chiefs -1.5 against the Philadelphia Eagles, total of 48.5. Who ends up winning the big game is a question that everyone would love to know. Because if we did know, then we certainly could make a lot of money on it. But needless to say, we'll bring in Adam Kaufman coming up next. He's got some opinions on the total in the Super Bowl, some different ways to bet it as well. So stay with us here on SportsGrid, here on NewsWire. Our Super Bowl coverage continues all week long. And we'll continue here on our show in about 2 minutes. So stay with us here on the Grid. You're watching NewsWire on SportsGrid every Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. I'm Craig Nish. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Best dressed guy, let me tell you, next to me in terms of Radio Row. I want to get your thoughts quickly on the game, Philly and KC. How do you see it playing out?
You know, obviously you got Patrick Mahomes, who just finds a way to win. Then you got on the other side of the table an alien, and Barkley. I mean, he's had an incredible year.
Right.
I think whoever has the balls last is going to win the football game.
Only on SportsGrid.
I have no idea how to categorize what Mavericks GM Nico Harrison pulled off, Joe. All I know is that he shipped off Luka Doncic without telling Luka about it.
If you thought conditioning was a problem for Luka, wait till you get a load of Anthony Davis tripping over air and then missing 40 games because he's like Glass Joe's.
The early line. Only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back. Guess what's going on Sunday? Anybody know? By now? I hope so. The Puppy Bowl? Man, I think there was a time when I was working exclusively on SiriusXM where we did Puppy Bowl shows. I'm embarrassed to say. I'm pretty sure I was not part of those shows, but I do remember that we did those. Adam Kaufman, if there's two puppies running down the street, he'll bet on one. So we'll see if he can pick one of the dogs to win this week. Does he like the dogs? Oh, wow. What a segue there, Adam. Like, that's A+ radio right there, right? A+ TV.
It's big market stuff.
Big time, big time. Okay, so updated line is the same as it's always been. Chiefs -1.5, -120. Juice going back and forth a little bit. I predicted, by the way, when the line came out that the line eventually would go to 2. It went completely the other way, and it looked like it would be 1. I'm sticking with that, though. I'm sticking with it. I think Sunday Chiefs are going to be -2, and I'll be right, and everybody else will be wrong. Anyway, total of 48.5. I know underdogs have really had a hard time. I'm sorry, underdogs have not had a hard time covering in the Super Bowl, but is this really an underdog game at all? It just feels like whoever you're going to take, you take the money line here. Maybe if it was 2.5 or 3, but 1.5, is this going to factor in?
Yeah, we have seen, as far as line movement, there was a fleeting 2 at one point early on. In the last couple days, we've seen a 1, but you're right. Mostly it is 1.5. I will be curious to see if it does move and settle somewhere else ahead of the game. I'm not so sure it's going to, just because, we just haven't seen sharp or even public money move it in one direction or the other across the board, although this is one of those rare instances because of all the public money that does come in for the Super Bowl, something I know that has been talked about a lot here on SportsGrid, that it doesn't need to be the sharps. It can be a lot of the casual people, the recreational bettors that do ultimately push it just because of the volume of money. I mean, we are looking at, for the Super Bowl, when all's said and done, and the bulk of it ends up coming on Saturday and Sunday, but there's going to be north of $1.5 billion bet across the country on this game. So it's going to be really interesting to see sort of how everything tracks. As far as, whether there is a true dog, I don't think there is. Certainly not in sentiment, right? Because I would say more of the public is backing the Eagles, which is the quote unquote dog, getting a point and a half here for this one. And who wants to bet against Patrick Mahomes on the other side, just historically with what he has done? I mean, the Chiefs have won 17 straight games dating back to last year, close games, one-score games. As far as games that have been decided inside a field goal, we have seen the favorite win this thing overwhelmingly, or at least the team that is, again, sitting within that number. So it's hard, pardon me, to go against Mahomes and go against the Chiefs with what they have done, winning the last couple of championships. But top to bottom, the better team, I would say, talent-wise, is the Eagles. It's just the other one has Patrick Mahomes. So that's where it gets a little bit tricky. So I think, to your point, I'd stay away from the spread number. Generally, the team that covers wins the game anyway, but it is such a short number. I would look to either the money line, especially if you like the Eagles, because you're getting plus money on it. And if you like the Chiefs, what I might consider doing is skip the spread, skip the money line, and just go right to Patrick Mahomes MVP. Because odds are, I guess pun intended, if the Chiefs win, Mahomes is going to be the MVP. That is the historical trend, and you'll get plus money on that.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. I see some long shots for Trent McDuffie, which I find funny because generally speaking, defensive players don't win 2 times, I think, in 25, 30 years. So the total is the one, I guess, slight line movement from where it came out. And historically speaking, by the time Sunday comes, I think this is also one that'll probably go back to where it was. I think it opened 49.5. Now it's down to 48.5. And, people bet overs in the Super Bowl. So that's where it stands. And Adam, the first half has just been deadly for the Philly. Like I don't care what game they played this season, they've been a second half scoring team. The Chiefs have not been a high scoring team all season long. So, I mean, it does make some sense that the under would be bet a little bit more than the over in this case. Do you like any of these alt lines here? Because honestly, if this game goes under, look at that, 45.5. Not saying that it will. I don't know the answer to that, but I mean, there's a 23-20 game. You're going to get plus 130 on that money there. So it just depends on how you believe, I guess, the game script is going to flow.
Yeah, I am a proponent of the over in this game, and call me a square because, like you said, people don't root for paint to dry in the Super Bowl. This is the one game that everybody watches that you're going to have record-breaking numbers. We root for entertainment. We root for points. That's what we want to see. So I think there are different ways to attack that. One that we've talked about on my show is 1 touchdown for each team in each half. That's a bet that's relatively close to even money. It's something that you could attack there if you like the over, if you think there are going to be points. And again, I do, and I agree with what you said. I think that by the time kickoff rolls around, this is going to be bet back up to 49.5, maybe even 50, depending on how much it pushes things. As far as the Eagles, though, a really interesting trend. And again, this kind of goes back to not necessarily who do you think is going to win, but which side, how do we find angles to bet that at least in terms of trends, be it Super Bowl trends or specific team trends, which are obviously far more relevant, are worth sort of trusting in. And one that I was reading about earlier that I think is good is the Eagles, while they are more of a second half scoring team, they just generally find a way to stay in front in the opening half. In the last 15 games that Philadelphia has played, they've held the lead at halftime in 13 of them. So if you want to take the Eagles' first half money line, that's minus 105, which I think is an intriguing investment in that side. And the Chiefs tend to be absolutely terrible in third quarters for whatever reason. So you could look at the Eagles' third quarter money line if you're on a book that offers that as well. But it's the fourth quarter in particular, and again, the full game where I just don't want to go against, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and that whole KC crew.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. All right, so let's take a look at some props here for the Chiefs. Then we'll go to the Eagles, and then we'll close it out with you, Adam. So the Mahomes passing yard prop, I believe I'm seeing, is one of the most bet up prop on the Chiefs side thus far. It's 250.5. I think it was 46 or 44. Now it's 50. Kelce 60.5. Worthy 54.5. and Kareem Hunt's rushing yards, 43.5. So I throw all those on a graphic. You're looking at them. Anything in particular that interests you of those four?
I would say Worthy is the guy that I would be interested in. I think there are going to be a lot of people, maybe it's the Swifties or Taylor Swift supporters anyway, that are going to be chasing after the Kelsey props and, rooting for Taylor's boyfriend and all that. I don't know. I mean, he's just wildly inconsistent. We've seen the overreactions from the book as well. His line going into the playoffs in that first divisional round game was 50. He more than doubled it. And then we see it jet all the way up to almost 70. And he comes in with like a third of it. And now in this game, obviously, it settles in the middle with, as you just said, in the ballpark of 60. And I just kind of want to stay away. If I'm going to bet Kelsey, I'd rather just attack the anytime touchdown and do it that way, because I do think that Mahomes tends to key in on him. I realize, against the Bills, there were multiple opportunities and we didn't see it get done. But again, if we're chasing points in this game, and remember that 2 years ago when these teams matched up in the Super Bowl, we saw 73 points. I think that's a better way to go after Kelsey. But Worthy, you may want to go over on his receptions, certainly on the yards. I just think that, people know what Mahomes is going to want to do. And that is, again, look toward Kelsey, establish himself, maybe even rush a little bit on his own. He had the banged up ankle last time around. This time, obviously, he's healthy, good to go. I think Worthy is a guy who could potentially open things up.
All right, finally, let's go to the Eagles, where Jalen Hurts is passing prop 211.5. A.J. Brown has gone from like 50 to 70 off the last week's game. Devonta Smith, 49.5. This is, Goddard to me is the interesting one here, 50.5. Seems to get a lot of targets to me the last few weeks. And then Barkley, 109.5 rushing yards, down from a week ago at 120.
So I'm surprised that Barkley moved the other way, because I bet him at 112.5, and now, like you said, 109.5. I do still believe in the over, obviously, on Saquon Barkley, but you said it. The guy that everybody and their mother likes, literally, because moms are betting on the Super Bowl too, Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert is the guy. It's because the Chiefs are terrible against tight ends.
We'll be right back.
Best dressed guy, let me tell you, next to me in terms of Radio Row. I want to get your thoughts quickly on the game, Philly and KC. How do you see it playing out?
Obviously you got Patrick Mahomes, who just finds a way to win. Then you got on the other side of the table an alien, and Barkley. I mean, he's had an incredible year.
Right.
I think whoever has the balls last is going to win the football game.
Only on SportsGrid.
I have no idea how to categorize what Mavericks GM Nico Harrison pulled off, Joe. All I know is that he shipped off Luka Doncic without telling Luka about it. If you thought conditioning was a problem for Luka, wait until you get a load of Anthony Davis tripping over air and then missing 40 games because he's like Glass Joe's.
The early line. Only on SportsGrid.
Phoenix Open is underway right now. This runs through the weekend, and the big names are all out for the event coming up. We'll get into that and get a preview with Brady Kannon, who joins us now. Brady, great to have you back here on NewsWire. And don't look now, but hey, big name won last week at Pebble Beach too. Rory McIlroy ends up taking down Pebble Beach. So good for him. And I know that anytime Rory wins, it sort of boosts his odds for the following week. But, I honestly did not hear a lot about McIlroy going in last week.
Yeah, no, I mean, he doesn't play Pebble Beach a whole lot. It's a signature event, status event now the last couple of years. So, of course, he and Scotty Scheffler and all the other big guys show up for it this year. But I didn't bet on him because he was coming off of a TGL match out your way in Florida on Monday, arrived to Pebble Beach late. And like I say, he doesn't play it typically as a part of his regular schedule. But now that it is a signature status event, he shows up and, he looked great. He came out and won the darn thing. And, the big question that everybody's asking, is this going to translate into him contending, about 6 weeks from now at Augusta National? So, I mean, that's the $1,000 question right now. And I hope he does. I've seen his odds dip a little bit. He was at 10-1 before the win at Pebble Beach, so there's not a whole lot of wiggle room to lower him a whole lot more. Scotty's at about 4-1 to win the Masters. And I've seen Rory dip down to as low as about plus 750 and maybe plus 950, but not a huge dip for his odds in the Masters off of that win at Pebble Beach.
All right, so let's get now to the Phoenix Open, which is probably one of the more entertaining events of the weekend with the crowd and everything that goes on there. Scotty Scheffler is the favorite to win as they tee off at plus 280. Hideki Matsuyama's off to a great start, so he's moved up to 16-1. Justin Thomas 14-1. Sungjae Im, and I know you like Sam Burns going into the weekend.
Yeah, and Burns, unfortunately, off to a 1-over start through 5 holes, so not the start we're looking for there. But you're right, Matsuyama, 2-under through 6 holes. Sungjae Im off to a good start as well, 2-under through 5 holes. Jake Knapp, who we saw win last year in Mexico, lives literally across the street from this golf course and practices here, very familiar with this property. He's 2-under through 4 holes. And Rasmus Højgaard, this guy is just making his way over from the DP World Tour. The Højgaard twins, Nikolai and Rasmus, both very, very good players. Nikolai last year really showed up at Torrey Pines, finished second place there at the Farmers Insurance Open last year. But Rasmus took a lot of betting attention this week. I saw him in the 30s, actually. I think he opened up in the neighborhood of 70 or 80-1, and I saw him as low as about 35-1 last night. And those bettors currently getting their money's worth as he is out in the lead, 4-under through 8 holes. So off to a real hot start here in Phoenix.
One thing I did not have on my Super Bowl squares card this weekend was Brady coming on with a live golf pick this week. I know we don't talk a ton about the live golf tournament. I mean, you pretty much hit on everything with me here on the show. You must really like something if that's what you're bringing to the table here.
Well, I really got into it thanks to SportsGrid and our friend Mike Carver. We started covering every live event here weekly on the network, and we had great success. Both Mike and I hit a number of outrights. When you only have a pool of 54 guys to choose from, Craig, it's a little bit easier. And so we hit some winners. So I said, why not try it again? Not a whole lot of information about this golf course. They're playing at night. It's in Saudi Arabia. It's golf under the lights. It is being televised on Fox as we speak. So golf at night under the lights. And, all the big names are currently at the top of the leaderboard. John Rahm, Patrick Reed. I landed on Peter Uihlein, who is at 2 under par. He's played well recently. I got him at 50-1. Brandon Grace, I took at 70-1. And then one of the shorter price guys, Cameron Smith, who has finished runner-up at this golf course twice, I believe, the Australian, I took him at 16-1. So just kind of some shots in the dark. This is the first live event. Like I say, not a whole lot of information, playing at night. It's not like we're putting the entire bankroll on this event. But hopefully we get into the swing of things with live again, and Mike and I start doing our previews and, hit a few more winners this season.
All right, hopefully so, because again, we could use them. And by the way, check out Brady's articles at golf.com as well for all the previews on the PGA Tour. All right, so here we go, Brady. This is it. Your last appearance with me. I know you'll appear this weekend here on SportsGrid for the Super Bowl, but Chiefs -1.5, total 48.5. I don't want to ruin the segment here, but I see that you do seem to like Philadelphia a lot more than most going into this game. So I would love to hear some potential reasons why and the bets that you'll make surrounding Philadelphia.
I've really been on the fence here, Craig, but I kind of came to a conclusion, yesterday, really, that I think I'm just going to stick with my initial thought, and that's when I crunched the numbers way back when this matchup materialized. I had Philly as a 1-point favorite, and so I'm going to stick with that. And the fight that we battle in our heads, the struggle is, but can I go against Mahomes? Because we've seen that movie play out so many times. I mean, the San Francisco 49ers were probably the better team. 2 years ago, the Eagles might have been the better team. This year, I think the Eagles are the better team. But we continue to get beaten by the better quarterback. I'm just tired of struggling with that, and I'm going to go with what my numbers tell me. And I do feel this Philadelphia team might be better than the Philadelphia team a couple years ago. They have that X factor in Saquon Barkley, who was different than Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift a couple of years ago. And it's the second year in a row that we've seen this Kansas City team not be necessarily the Kansas City team we're used to. They seem to flip a switch in the postseason, and that's hard to gauge. But again, going off of the entire body of work we've seen this season, I think Philadelphia is the better team. And I'll tell you what, Craig, I think it seems like the public is on Philadelphia as well. And the public can move the number when we get that type of volume for the Super Bowl. I think we're going to see this close pick 'em, maybe even Philadelphia as a 1-point favorite. So if you want to grab the 1.5 now with Philly, take it. If you like Kansas City, I think I would wait.
Yeah, it's interesting. You and I see it completely differently there. I don't know why. I see Kansas City going to 2. I see.
It's very possible. It's very possible.
I don't know. I don't know, but that's my feeling, and certainly, who knows who's right or who's wrong. But Brady, enjoy your weekend, and I know you'll be covering it for us here at SportsGrid. We'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Craig.
Best dressed guy, let me tell you, next to me in terms of Radio Row. I want to get your thoughts quickly on the game, Philly and KC. How do you see it playing out?
Obviously you got Patrick Mahomes, who just finds a way to win. Then you got on the other side of the table an alien, and Barkley. I mean, he's had an incredible year.
Right.
I think whoever has the balls last is going to win the football game.
Only on SportsGrid.
I have no idea how to categorize what Mavericks GM Nico Harrison pulled off, Joe. All I know is that he shipped off Luka Doncic without telling Luka about it.
If you thought conditioning was a problem for Luka, wait until you get a load of Anthony Davis tripping over air and then missing 40 games because he's like Glass Joe's.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. I think that most of you watching have betting interest on the Super Bowl, but are you willing to put $1 million up on the side that you think that's going to win? I'm going to guess probably not. We'll talk about some of the bigger bets that have been made. Also, some really good news for those college basketball enthusiasts out there as we end the Thursday show with some last licks. Remember back in the day, and I'm talking about probably at the time where sports betting wasn't legal, go back 8-10 years ago, when somebody would bet $1 million on the Super Bowl. We'd find out who it is. Like, it used to be like Floyd Mayweather. Remember those days? Now it's like kind of commonplace. Right. Mattress Mac was the guy. I didn't want to bring it up, but Frank did it there. Yeah. I mean, he was more the World Series, I think, than the Super Bowl. But there have been some very big bets made on the game. So follow if you wish. Here they are. Somebody has reportedly placed a $800,000 bet on the Philadelphia Eagles to win the Super Bowl at plus 110. But conversely, someone has bet $320,000 on the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl at minus 130. And then, as you can see there on the graphic, there's some money on the under coming in, 50 grand, 50 grand, 50 grand. Will somebody actually bet 1 million this year on the Super Bowl? My guess is no. I think that's probably the most amount. But if it does come in, it does feel like Brady is right. It does feel like the bigger money is coming in on the Eagles this season. So we will see. And we'll also see where that line ends up moving to. We'll see if I'm right or Brady's right. All right, Ron Rivera, Riverboat Ron, former head coach of the Carolina Panthers, is going back to school. Remember that movie in the 80s? You probably don't. I do. Two-time NFL Coach of the Year, Cal alum Ron Rivera is going to be a general manager. He's back in football, this time with the team that he played for at the University of California. He was an All-American for the Golden Bears. I think he was in the Cal-Stanford game, the band game, if I'm not mistaken, too. And Rivera said on social media before he made the rounds yesterday on Radio Row that Bill Belichick, yes, that very, very popular Bill Belichick move going to North Carolina, said make going back to college cool. Now, it's really fascinating to me how a lot of these coaches think that being a general manager is very easy to do. In this new day of NIL, I guess the pro coach could sort of translate to now college coaches, because instead of recruiting, they could just pay players to go there. But we'll see. We'll see how much success Ron Rivera had. Once upon a time, Ron Rivera was considered to be a very good head coach in the NFL. Maybe lost his way a little bit toward the end in Carolina, although the Panthers haven't been that good since he's left. That's true. All right, baby. It's Dick Vitale. He's back. He's back in college basketball. It's been, folks, 3.5 years since my guy Dick Vitale has called a college basketball game. He announced he was cancer-free back on January the 8th, and he is going to call a college basketball game on ESPN for the first time in almost 4 years. And what a game that he has in front of him. It's going to be the Duke versus Clemson game that is Saturday afternoon. Could not end the show on a better note there. Dickie V, all-time great announcer, all-time great person, big college basketball fan, lives in West Florida, Tampa area, big Tampa Bay Rays fan, lives in Sarasota, Florida, place I used to live for many years too. Congrats to Dickie V. Happy to see him back and calling a college basketball game on Saturday, if you have time for that. What a busy weekend it's going to be ahead. We got the Super Bowl, all of our coverage continuing. And as a program reminder, Sunday morning, it is a supersized edition of Fantasy Sports Today, our last Fantasy Sports Today football show of the season, 8 a.m. Sunday. It's me, George Kurtz, Matt Stryker, and Joe Pisapia will run the whole thing, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern. For those of you who want to play the captain's game over on DraftKings or play FanDuel, we'll help you out in fantasy and some props as well. But, folks, our coverage from the Super Bowl continues. Scott Farrell coming up at 3 o'clock Eastern today. All the great guests coming through today, generally speaking, the best day out on Radio Row. You're not going to hear me say that tomorrow. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say Friday is the best day because generally, people start leaving at that time. But anyway, today's a great day. Make sure you catch it this afternoon. I know Gabe's appearance with Pat McAfee's coming up Friday. That is true. But as far as the big name guests coming through, today's the day. Make sure you stay on the grid for it all day long. Thanks again to Brady Kannon for coming on the show, Gilbert McGregor from Sporting News. Thanks to Adam Kaufman as well as our director, Luke, and for my producer, Frank. I'm Craig Mish. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day here on Sports Grid. It's a great day to just sit back, stream us, consume us, watch us the rest of the day. Keep the app open, watch us online, however you are at work. I know a lot of you are just, have the TV on somewhere and you're just catching the Super Bowl coverage. Download the Sports Grid app and you can just watch us, by the way, for free, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, including tomorrow morning on our next edition of NewsWire. I'll see you then.